Hey friends, here's tonight's quiet journey. We're stepping back into a world of smoke and silence, a time when every street lamp flickered through soot-thick fog, and every breath carried a trace of coal. Victorian London wasn't all cobbled charm and corsets. It was cold floors, worn hands, and the quiet resilience of getting by. Tonight, we won't follow lords or inventors. We'll follow Eleanor, a laundress's daughter with nothing but routine to guide her. Her story isn't extraordinary, but in its slow, steady rhythm, there's something deeply human. So settle in, let the gas lights glow low, and walk with us through the gray hush of a London that never truly slept. Here's where Eleanor's story quietly begins. The air is thick, not storm thick, not winter thick, just London thick. It settles low in the lungs and sticks to the skin, even indoors. Outside the narrow windows of the Southwark row house, chimney stacks cough out slow ribbons of smoke, turning the morning into a gray that never really lifts. Eleanor Marsh is not old enough to walk, but she knows the pattern of light through soot. It comes thin and slanted, barely pushing past the lace curtain. It dapples on the floorboards when it can, but most days it stays caught in the fog. Inside, everything is quiet, but never still. Her mother's hands work the laundry basin. A wooden paddle knocks rhythmically against the side of the tub. Drip, scrape, fold, scrub, always with that same song of water and wear. There are 4 in the room, 5 if you count baby Thomas, asleep in the basket drawer. The space is long but narrow, just enough for a cot, a chair, a stove, and the corner where the washing is done. Heat is a luxury here. The coals are kept low unless someone's ill. So Eleanor learns early how to keep warm without fire, layered petticoats, standing near her mother, and keeping moving. Outside, the city makes its own lullaby, the slow clatter of carriage wheels on stone, the distant cry of a pie seller, the thunk of boots in alleys where the fog hangs thickest. No birdsong here, not really, just the squeak of cart axles and the rustle of soot falling from the roofs after rain. Her father had once worked the docks, though he's been gone since Eleanor was small enough to forget the shape of his voice. People don't talk about that much. They just say, "It happened fast." Then her mother got quieter and the laundry got heavier. Most mornings begin the same way. The day's water must be drawn from the street pump, which means clumsy boots in the half-dark. Sometimes the pump handle freezes, and sometimes the water smells faintly of metal. Eleanor doesn't yet carry the bucket. She's only 6. But she walks with her mother and listens, always listening for hoofbeats, for shouts, for silence. Back home, the first fire is lit in the stove, not to cook, but to warm the flat iron. Clothes must be pressed before delivery. Laundry is a living, but it's also a burden. It steams up the windows and warps the boards. It leaves lye cracks in the skin. Eleanor's job is the pins. She gathers them when they drop, sorts them into tins, makes sure none end up in the bath linens. Her mother says that's what keeps customers returning. Not the soap, not the starch, but the absence of pins and hair in the folds. Breakfast comes in pieces. Stale bread softened in tea, sometimes a bit of dripping spread thinly across it. Butter is rare. Jam is rarer still. Warmth comes more from routine than from food. After breakfast, Eleanor watches the fog from the steps. It curls around the boots of passing men and women, never lifting higher than the knees. People walk differently in fog, careful, hunched slightly forward. They disappear quickly down side alleys, swallowed by brick and soot. She doesn't know their names, but she recognizes their shapes. The woman with the basket hat, the coal boy with the limp, the postman who whistles off-key. London is too large to know, but a street can still become familiar. Inside, linens are hung, water is poured, more ash is scraped from the stove. The flat begins to smell like wet wool and steam. The days stretch long, not in boredom, but in repetition. No clocks tick in the Marsh home, only the movement of task to task, hang, fold, stir, wipe, marks the time. And in this, Eleanor learns a rhythm, a kind of music no one plays but everyone feels. By afternoon, the fog thins just enough to hint at the outlines of taller buildings, chimneys, cranes, steeples. The world outside still exists, but it always feels a little too far, like something behind glass. And when the sun lowers, though no one ever sees it directly, the day folds in. The coals are banked again, the basin is emptied. The last wet shirts steam quietly on the rods overhead. Eleanor curls up beside her mother on the shared mattress. The blankets are heavy and musty, but warm. The city continues around them, slow, muffled, distant. A constant hum beneath the silence. This is where she lives, where she begins, not in grandeur, not in spectacle, just in soot, in breath, in small warmths and smaller spaces, in the quiet persistence of surviving, one soft gray day at a time. Eleanor is older now, perhaps 8, perhaps 9. It's hard to mark time when birthdays are not always remembered and ages blur between census years. But she is tall enough to help carry the wash pails, strong enough to wring cloth with her mother, and curious enough to notice more than she used to. And what she notices most are the chimneys. They are everywhere, stacked, crooked, layered like jagged teeth against the sky. Each one smokes at its own pace. Some sputter in fits, others breathe steadily, like slow creatures of brick and soot. When the wind is still, the chimneys draw long shadows down alleyways, painting shapes Eleanor has come to recognize as surely as she does the pattern on her only dress. She walks often now, errands, deliveries, collecting cloth from homes across the borough, and every walk leads her past more chimneys. Big ones with tall pots, narrow ones with soot so thick it crumbles in flakes. Sometimes boys lean into them, scrubbing and brushing and coughing. Those are the chimney sweeps, and they are smaller than she expected. One waved at her once, his face smudged like charcoal. He grinned with all his teeth. Not because he was happy, but because that's what boys do when covered in soot. They smile because it's the only clean part left. The chimneys speak of more than fire. They tell the story of heat, of survival, of how every home in London must consume coal to keep the cold from creeping in. But they also speak of the air, the thick, smoky air that settles over rooftops like a second skin. Some days Eleanor imagines climbing one, not to clean, but to rise above it all, to stand at the top and see something beyond roofs, beyond laundry, beyond steam. Instead, she walks. Her mother has taught her which streets to trust. Never go near St. Saviour's too close to dusk. Avoid the narrow side of Mint Street after rain. Keep to the shadows, but don't disappear into them. There is a rhythm to safety in London, and it is passed quietly from mother to daughter with the same care as tea rations and dress seams. The city, though gray, is not silent. It hums. From above, chimneys exhale. From below, footsteps echo. Carts roll. Coalmen shout. Vendors sing strange calls about eels, ink, onions. And beneath it all is the endless murmur of people surviving. One afternoon, on a walk to deliver a basket of pressed shirts, Eleanor sees a woman hanging bright blue cloth from a window. Not royal blue, not noble silk, but something bright enough to catch the eye, a scrap of sky amid the soot. Eleanor pauses, watching the cloth flutter. For a moment she feels like the city has forgotten its gray. When she returns home, she tells her mother about it. The blue fabric, the light. Her mother smiles. It's small, but real. Color's not gone, she says. It's just waiting. Later, Eleanor dreams of the chimneys again, but this time they don't smoke. They whistle, like flutes in the wind. They make music high above the streets, and it carries over the rooftops in soft waves. That morning, she wakes with soot on her fingertips. Not from dreams, of course, but from the edge of the hearth, where she leaned too close to feel the warmth. Still, she smiles. Even soot can feel soft in the right light. That day the chimneys don't seem so sharp. They look like sentinels, like watchmen, like part of the city's quiet promise to keep burning, keep warming, keep holding itself together, one coal at a time. And Eleanor, she keeps walking, keeps listening, keeps noticing. Not everything in London is beautiful, but some things are quietly brave. The weeks turn, and London's breath grows colder. Fog rolls in like a tide each morning, pooling low in alleys and drifting through the market lanes. It softens everything, the corners of buildings, the sharpness of sound, even the outline of Eleanor herself as she moves through it. She begins to measure her days by the thickness of the air. Thin fog means errands. Thick fog means staying close to the laundry, to the warmth of tubs, and the familiar shape of the kettle. There is comfort in its dullness. But there are also dangers. Gas lamps glow like dull stars against the haze. They buzz faintly when lit, halos spreading gold rings that fade quickly into the gray. On fog-thick days, they barely cut the dark. Eleanor walks slower. Her feet learn to feel the cobbles beneath the mist. Every step is a memory, every turn practiced. The streets lose their edges. Doorways appear where none were before. Figures emerge and vanish like actors on a stage with no curtain. One day she hears a horse before she sees it. The sound is soft, a distant clop, but it comes quickly. Too quickly. She presses back against a wall just as the cart rattles past, its driver wrapped in a scarf, his eyes barely visible. He does not slow. After that, Eleanor begins carrying a stub of candle. Not to light the way, just to have something bright in her pocket. Some mornings, the fog lifts by noon, revealing a city damp and blinking in the pale sun. Other days it lingers, clinging to windows and wrapping round chimneys until everything feels blurred. Eleanor watches it all from the laundry doorway. She leans on the frame, warm steam curling out behind her, cold mist waiting in front. There is a line between the two, and she lives on it. Once, she hears a woman say the fog is made of ghosts. Old souls who don't want to leave the city, she murmurs, tightening her shawl. Eleanor doesn't believe in ghosts, but she does believe in the way fog hides things, and sometimes reveals them. In the mist, she sees her world made new. Streets she thought she knew become strange, sounds become clues, and her own breath becomes visible, curling before her like a ribbon. One evening, walking home through a particularly dense stretch near Borough Market, she sees something shimmering. Just for a moment. A figure in white, or maybe silver, standing still beneath a lamplight. Then gone. She never mentions it, not to her mother, not even to herself. Some things are meant to pass through, like fog. On Fridays, if the weather allows, Eleanor walks with her mother to the market beneath the old clock tower. It is not the grand market of the West End, with stone arches and orchestras, It is simpler, messier, realer. The cobbles are uneven and the stalls lean like tired shoulders, but the colors are bright, carrots still dusted with soil, apples piled high in wooden crates, strings of dried fish that shine like coins. The air is thick with smells, vinegar, onion, yeast, damp wool. It is loud, not frightening loud, just full. Voices rise and fall, coins clink, vendors call out, voices worn like aprons. Some know Eleanor's mother. They nod without smiling and pass over the bruised produce last, after better customers have had their pick. Eleanor carries the sack. She holds it close to her chest when they pass the pie man, his cart always steaming, his smile too familiar. Her mother walks faster then. They do not buy much. A turnip, always. Tea, if they have coin. A bundle of fading greens tied with twine. Sometimes a heel of bread that smells like smoke. But Eleanor does not mind. She likes the way the sun falls through the open beams of the roof, the way dust swirls in golden lines, the way the clock above them ticks loudly even when no one listens. That clock has not kept true time in years, but it still chimes once every hour, as if trying. One day they pass a stall selling old books, some with frayed ribbons, others with pages torn but still legible. Eleanor slows. She cannot read, not properly, but her mother humors her, letting her finger the edges of a water-stained volume. The stall-keeper does not chase her off. That night Eleanor dreams of the book. In the dream its pages are warm and whisper when turned. She does not understand the words, but they hum, like her mother's voice on good days. After that, she watches for the bookstall every week, even if they never stop again. The mornings grow colder. Eleanor's breath clouds the glass as she peers out the loft window, tracing lines into the condensation with her finger. Outside, chimney smoke drifts sideways, tugged by the wind into long ribbons of gray. It's a wash day, but then every day is. Clothes never stop arriving. Muddy hems, smoke-stained cuffs, underthings yellowed at the seams. Laundry, it seems, is the only thing in London that multiplies overnight. Eleanor lowers the kettle from the hook above the flame. Her fingers are red from the cold, but she doesn't mind. She likes the rhythm. Fill, heat, pour, stir. The copper tub creaks as it fills. The room fills with steam. Soon the scent of lye will follow. Her mother is quieter today, not angry, just tired. Eleanor knows not to ask. As they work, Eleanor listens to the sound of ash being swept from the hearth outside. Their neighbor, Mrs. Ketley, sweeps early, always muttering about her knees. The broom whispers over stone. It's a soft sound, but precise. It reminds Eleanor of combing hair. The ash goes into buckets, then down into the alley, then sometimes into carts. Ash for bricklayers, ash for soap, ash for filling holes in the road. London, Eleanor thinks, is built on soot. Later, she carries a load of rinsed linen to the drying line behind the court. The wind has picked up, tugging the cloth into dancing shapes. White flags, she thinks, fluttering without war. She sees a boy watching from the edge of the lane. He's thin, maybe her age, maybe older. He carries no basket, no tools, just stands, chewing something and watching the line sway. Eleanor lifts her chin slightly, acknowledging, not inviting. He nods back. The next day, he's there again, still silent, still watching. But this time, he helps lift a fallen peg, passing it to her without a word. She doesn't mention him to her mother, not yet. In the afternoon, as she folds sheets inside, her mother tells her about ash cakes. People used to bake flatbread right on the hearthstone, let the ash settle, knock it off before eating. Eleanor frowns. Wasn't it dirty? Her mother shrugs. You'd be surprised what hunger makes acceptable. They don't make ash cakes, but they do eat boiled carrots and bread crust with mustard scraped thin. That evening, smoke curls in under the door, not thick, not choking, just the usual London's sigh. Eleanor lies in bed, listening to it settle in the rafters. She wonders if the boy has a bed, if he has a window to press his breath against, if anyone folds cloth where he sleeps. She thinks of ash again. It's what's left when everything else is gone. But it's warm, it's soft, and in the right wind it flies. The mornings grow colder. Eleanor's breath clouds the glass as she peers out the loft window, tracing lines into the condensation with her finger. Outside, chimney smoke drifts sideways, tugged by the wind into long ribbons of gray. It's a wash day, but then, every day is. Clothes never stop arriving. Muddy hems, smoke-stained cuffs, underthings yellowed at the seams. Laundry, it seems, is the only thing in London that multiplies overnight. Eleanor lowers the kettle from the hook above the flame. Her fingers are red from the cold, but she doesn't mind. She likes the rhythm. Fill, heat, pour, stir. The copper tub creaks as it fills. The room fills with steam. Soon the scent of lye will follow. Her mother is quieter today, not angry, just tired. Eleanor knows not to ask. As they work, Eleanor listens to the sound of ash being swept from the hearth outside. Their neighbor, Mrs. Ketley, sweeps early, always muttering about her knees. The broom whispers over stone. It's a soft sound, but precise. It reminds Eleanor of combing hair. The ash goes into buckets, then down into the alley, then sometimes into carts. Ash for bricklayers, ash for soap, ash for filling holes in the road. London, Eleanor thinks, is built on soot. Later, she carries a load of rinsed linen to the drying line behind the court. The wind has picked up, tugging the cloth into dancing shapes. White flags, she thinks, fluttering without war. She sees a boy watching from the edge of the lane. He's thin, maybe her age, maybe older. He carries no basket, no tools, just stands, chewing something and watching the line sway. Eleanor lifts her chin slightly, acknowledging, not inviting. He nods back. The next day, he's there again, still silent, still watching, but this time he helps lift a fallen peg, passing it to her without a word. She doesn't mention him to her mother, not yet. In the afternoon, as she folds sheets inside, her mother tells her about ash cakes. People used to bake flatbread right on the hearthstone, let the ash settle, knock it off before eating. Eleanor frowns. Wasn't it dirty? Her mother shrugs. You'd be surprised what hunger makes acceptable. They don't make ash cakes, but they do eat boiled carrots and bread crust with mustard scraped thin. That evening, smoke curls in under the door. Not thick, not choking, just the usual London's sigh. Eleanor lies in bed, listening to it settle in the rafters. She wonders if the boy has a bed, if he has a window to press his breath against, if anyone folds cloth where he sleeps. She thinks of ash again. It's what's left when everything else is gone, but it's warm, it's soft, and in the right wind it flies. By morning, the wind shifts again. The scent that drifts through the court is different. Earthier, warm, bread. Someone's baking early, and it cuts through the cold like a promise. Eleanor wakes slowly. For once there is no rattle of the wash kettle, no scrape of lye. Her mother still sleeps, curled beneath the mended wool blanket. Eleanor wraps her shawl tight and slips out of bed. Downstairs the coal stove is out. She opens the small iron door, breathes in its emptiness. The warmth from yesterday has gone. So she sets to work building a new fire. Paper, then sticks, then the coal. The match flares. A bright hiss. She cups it like a secret and nudges it beneath the kindling. Smoke curls upward in slow, lazy ribbons. Outside, footsteps echo across the flagstones. The milk boy's cart squeaks. The bread scent grows stronger. Eleanor can almost feel the crust beneath her fingers, crisp, brown, scored with flour. They haven't had bakery bread in weeks. Her mother wakes with a soft sound. Not a word, just a sigh, like the house exhaling. She doesn't rise yet. Eleanor ladles water into the tin basin and begins heating it for tea. Later she ventures out for coal. The sky is pale, but not quite blue. Too many chimneys. Fog clings low. At the yard, she trades coppers for a burlap sack's worth. The man lifts it for her, heavier than it looks. She passes the bakery on the way back. The boy is there again. He leans against the corner post, still watching. But this time his lips are dusted with crumbs. He notices her, nods, then pulls something from his pocket and offers it. A heel of bread. She hesitates just a moment, then takes it. It's warm. The bread was yesterday. Today is quieter. The boy does not appear. Eleanor waits longer than usual by the lines, pinning socks and sleeves with slow, deliberate care. She doesn't look for him, not directly, but her eyes drift toward the post all the same. He doesn't come. The air is thick with stillness. Fog has crept back in, softening edges. Sounds are muffled as if wrapped in wool. The clink of the milk bottles. A baby's cry 2 houses down. Even the coal carts roll more gently. In the square, the old clock tower chimes. Its bell is cracked, slightly off-key, but dependable. It sounds the hour with quiet stubbornness. Eleanor's mother once told her the tower had been leaning for decades. No one dares fix it. On errands, Eleanor passes beneath its shadow. She likes it best in the early morning, when no one's around and the pigeons claim its ledges. They coo and shuffle, puffed against the cold. Sometimes she mimics their sounds, low and soft, just to feel something answer back. That afternoon, she stops by the seamstress's shop. Her mother has finished mending a coat and sent her to return it. The coat is heavy, lined with wool. Eleanor carries it draped over her arms like an offering. The shop smells of starch and wax. Long rows of buttons gleam in little trays. Mrs. Dauncey nods to her, takes the coat without a word, then slips a coin into Eleanor's palm. Payment. Her fingers curl around it quickly. Even small coins are precious. On the walk home, she detours through the market lane. She doesn't need anything, just walking, watching. Fog clings to crates of cabbages, to crates of eggs wrapped in straw. A man calls out prices, but his voice is swallowed by the air. A baker's girl spills a basket of rolls. One bounces near Eleanor's feet. She picks it up and hands it back. The girl doesn't thank her, only looks surprised. Eleanor continues walking. The clock tower tolls again. Late afternoon. Back home, her mother is awake, combing her hair in slow, methodical strokes. Eleanor makes tea. They don't speak much today, but the quiet isn't sharp. It's just fog. Later that evening, Eleanor stands beneath the loft window, forehead pressed to the glass. The street below is a ribbon of gray and gaslight. No figures move. She thinks about the clock tower, leaning slightly, still holding time. She thinks about the boy, silent as a shadow, offering warmth. She thinks about tomorrow. And then she climbs into bed. Morning returns in shades of coal and pearl. Eleanor wakes to the distant clang of a delivery cart, the rattle of glass milk bottles, and the whisper of her mother's steps across the boards. Steam fogs the kitchen window as the kettle warms, the usual clink of tin mugs and scrape of wooden spoons, but the air feels heavier as if holding its breath. Mid-morning, a knock. Not at the front, at the side gate. No one uses the side gate. Eleanor peers through the curtain. A figure stands there, thin, hooded, unmoving. Her breath catches, then slips out. It's the boy. The coat is the same, sooty brown and fraying at the seams. He doesn't wave, just waits. She opens the gate. He speaks softly, barely above the fog. Your mother, the laundry, she left something. He holds out a small bundle, white linen tightly folded. Eleanor takes it. It's a collar, embroidered initials, E.J. She doesn't know the name. From the house on Parnell Street, he says. The one with the red shutters. She nods. We'll return it. A pause. Then he adds, the fog's thicker near the river today. She thinks he might smile, just barely, before turning and slipping away. The rest of the day is marked by this interruption. The collar sits folded on the mantel. Her mother doesn't ask. They both understand. Odd things arrive in odd ways. That's just London. Eleanor keeps glancing toward the side gate. That evening, while hanging a final set of underclothes by the stove to dry, she thinks of his voice, of how it didn't match the city's noise. It was low, careful, like he didn't want to wake something sleeping. Fog rolls past the windows again, not heavy, but enough to blur the corners. The kettle whistles. Her mother hums, and Eleanor wonders if tomorrow he'll knock again. By morning, frost has crept in at the corners of the window panes, tracing delicate fingers across the glass. Eleanor wraps a shawl around her shoulders before descending the stairs. Her feet tap lightly across the chilled boards. The fog lingers, thinner but unwilling to leave. Her mother's breath curls visibly in the kitchen as she unpacks potatoes and roots from a cloth bag. Parcel came for you, she says without looking up. She points to the edge of the table. Eleanor steps closer. A small paper-wrapped bundle sits atop the wood, tied with butcher's twine. There's no name, no note. She opens it carefully. Inside, a small book. Leather cover, worn smooth at the edges. Pressed between the pages, a thin pressed flower, ivory white. She runs her fingers over the spine. Where did it come from? Boy again, her mother says. Didn't say a word, just left it. Eleanor takes the book to the hearth, settles into the corner chair, and flips through. It's a diary, blank, except one page. Fog hides things, but it doesn't erase them. She reads the line 3 times, then closes the book slowly. After breakfast, she walks to Butcher's Lane. The street is narrower here, buildings pressing inward. Smells of salt meat and old vinegar mix with the morning damp. No sign of the boy. She lingers by the shop fronts. In one window, a hanging pig's carcass turns gently, suspended by a hook. In another, candles flicker, casting pale halos. Near the end of the lane, a dog barks, a low, persistent sound. Eleanor turns the corner and sees a woman in a black bonnet struggling with a wrapped parcel. The paper has torn, potatoes spill across the stones. Eleanor hurries forward, crouches, gathers them up. The woman offers a soft thank you, her voice as dry as the paper wrapping. Are you all right walking? Eleanor asks. The woman nods, adjusts the parcel, and moves on without another word. That night, Eleanor writes her name on the first blank page of the diary. The next morning she leaves it, carefully wrapped, by the side gate, just in case he comes back. The diary is gone the next morning. Eleanor finds only a sprig of rosemary in its place, fresh, not dried, tucked where the parcel had been. She knows it's from him. It smells sharp and green in the gray of the early fog. She tucks it behind her ear. Her mother asks no questions, only gestures to the laundry pile. But there's less resentment in her silence today. Perhaps something has softened. After chores, Eleanor walks toward the west end of town. A woman in the seamstress shop mentioned work, odd jobs, at the old bell foundry, now used more for storage than casting. Eleanor doesn't expect much, but she's curious. The bell foundry stands like a crouched giant at the edge of the soot-dusted square. Its roof is scarred with moss, and pigeons scatter as she approaches. One door hangs slightly askew, revealing shadow and dust beyond. A man meets her at the threshold, wiry, mustached, grease on his sleeves. He asks if she's willing to sort ledgers and clean copper fittings. She says yes before he finishes the question. Inside, it's cooler than outside, smells of iron and beeswax. She spends the day wiping grime from numbers penned decades ago, watching dust motes spin in the half-light. A single massive bell sits in the center of the room, cracked, unpolished, silent. The man says it's never been rung. She returns home tired but content. Her hands smell of polish and old paper. At dusk, she steps outside with a cup of tea and finds a chalk mark on the brick near the side gate. A circle bisected once. She doesn't touch it, but she smiles. The mornings come slower now. The fog lingers, thick as soup, and the streets remain hushed long past sunrise. Eleanor has started waking before her mother, lighting the stove herself, feeling more certain in the stillness. Each morning she checks the bricks. Sometimes there's a new chalk mark, sometimes not. Yesterday it was a half moon, today nothing. Still, she looks. At the foundry, the work continues. The man with the mustache, Mr. Cray, isn't unkind, just terse. He trusts her now, at least enough to let her handle the more delicate fittings. There's satisfaction in making old brass shine again. One afternoon, Mr. Cray pauses at the door and grunts, "Bell used to be for a cathedral. Never made it there." Eleanor nods, unsure what to say. At midday, she eats bread and cheese on the steps, watching pigeons bicker over crumbs. One perches boldly near her foot. She tosses it a crust. It bobs in thanks, then flutters up to the bell's rim and settles there like a gargoyle. She finds herself sketching it later with a pencil stub and old ledger paper, the curves of its feathers, the sharp tilt of its eye. She hasn't drawn in years. Her mother said it was a waste of time. That night, a folded paper waits under a stone by the gate. It's a drawing. Her pigeon, but improved. Wings spread, mid-flight. Beneath it, a single word. Free. The next morning brings Drizzle, the kind that clings to sleeves and sneaks under collars. Eleanor walks to the foundry with her shawl pulled tight. The pigeon greets her again. Same perch, same glare, like a guardian. Inside, the bell feels warmer today, less like a relic, more like a secret. She runs a cloth over its flank and hums, just to hear how the sound bounces. Mr. Cray drops a rusted box at her feet with a grunt. If you're set on drawings, sort through these, old architectural things. Might find some clean paper. The box is full of brittle blueprints and soot-smudged sketches. Churches, towers, iron beams. Some dated, some unsigned. Eleanor sifts carefully, fingers dusting fragments of ink from corners. Tucked in the middle is a thick folder. Inside, dozens of illustrations, scenes of street vendors, alleys, even laundry lines, done in charcoal, unmistakably by the same hand that drew her pigeon. At the bottom of the stack, another note. This one reads, "You see the city the same way I do." That evening she lingers on the steps, hoping he'll pass. But no one comes, just the quiet hiss of rain and a dog barking 2 streets over. Later her mother finds her sketching again. This time, a corner of the market with 2 boys chasing a runaway wheel of cheese. Her mother stands in silence, arms crossed, but something about her eyes softens. "I used to draw," she says at last, "when your father was alive." They don't speak more of it, but she doesn't stop Eleanor either. By week's end, the rooftops have turned slick with frost. Eleanor treads more carefully now, clutching the handrail each morning as she descends the outer stair of their tenement. A folded envelope waits for her on the last step. It's sealed with wax, an old scrap of blue ribbon poking out. She glances around, heart tapping fast, but no one stirs. Inside, the note is brief. Climb to the bell tower after dusk. Come alone. She pockets the letter and walks to the foundry, her mind circling around it all day. She nearly spills brass polish, drops her cloth twice. Mr. Cray squints at her but says nothing. That night, long after her mother has fallen asleep, Eleanor wraps herself in her thickest shawl and slips from the flat. Fog hangs low, muffling the world. It's nearly silent. The foundry door creaks open at her touch. Inside, the great bell looms, solemn and still. A narrow stair curves beside it, half concealed behind a soot-dark curtain. She climbs. The tower is colder than she imagined. Wind sneaks through the stones. Her fingers tremble as she lifts the final hatch and climbs onto the roof. He's already there. A boy, no older than she, with a satchel and charcoal-smudged hands. His coat is patched, his boots 2 sizes too large. "I thought you wouldn't come," he says softly. She steps closer. "You drew the pigeon." He nods. "And the bell, and the woman in the red shawl who sells tea by the dock." She laughs, surprised. "That's my aunt." "I thought so." They sit together on the stone ledge, legs swinging. He hands her a scrap of paper, another drawing. It's her, sketching, with the pigeon in the background. "I don't show these to anyone," he admits. "They'd get ruined at home." She studies the lines. He's caught something honest in the way her brow creases, the way she squints when she concentrates. "Why me?" she asks. "Because you see. Most people just look." The city stretches beneath them, chimneys coughing smoke, windows glowing faint amber, the Thames glinting like tarnished silver in the dark. They sit in silence a long time, 2 silhouettes framed by soot and stars. Then he says, "Tomorrow I leave for the coast. There's work there." Eleanor's heart dips. "You're leaving?" "I had to meet you first." He hands her a final envelope. "Don't open it until the pigeons return." Then he's gone, down the ladder, swallowed by fog. Eleanor sits a while longer, listening to the quiet city hum below. The pigeons returned on a Wednesday, just after dawn. A soft fluttering at the windowsill, feathers brushing the glass with the hesitant rhythm of small wings unsure of welcome. Eleanor sat up, blankets sliding from her shoulders, and tiptoed barefoot across the cold floorboards to see 3 of them. One familiar, gray and cocky, the one who'd perched on the foundry bell. Another pale and speckled. The third thin and nervous. They didn't wait, just landed, blinked at her, and vanished again into the smoke-hung sky. She ran for the envelope. It was still there, tucked inside the back of the old mantel clock. She had hidden it behind the clock's warped brass workings, something her mother never wound anymore, its tick frozen since last Christmas. With shaking fingers she opened it. Inside, a folded map. A street drawn from memory, narrow, bent, and wrong on any real city grid. A crooked square marked in ink with a tiny symbol beside it. A bell drawn in haste. Underneath, a single instruction. Bring the drawing of the wheel of cheese. Eleanor clutched the envelope to her chest, heart flickering like gaslight. Later that morning, she found the drawing in her ledger, the one she'd sketched after the market day, a boy chasing cheese, a mother laughing, a dog giving chase. Her hands trembled again. She folded it, tucked it into her coat, and left before her mother stirred. The map led her east, past the ironworks, past a bakery where the scent of burnt crust lingered in the gutter, past a row of crumbling tenements that leaned like tired old men whispering secrets. The streets narrowed, foot traffic thinned, and just when she thought she must have taken a wrong turn, there it was. A tiny shop, no sign, no name. The door is carved with vines and worn brass hinges. She hesitated, then knocked. No one answered. She tried the handle. Inside, the smell of ink and dust and warm cedar, a table stacked with charcoals and thick paper, and on the far wall dozens of drawings, scenes of the city, of children, of the river at dusk. Some were hers. The rest were his. She stepped closer. Each drawing was held with old brass pins, labeled in careful hand, Tuesday Fog, Cheese Chase, Lady by the Dock. The bell was there too, framed and central. Above it, a small wooden plaque, The Watchers Draw So None Forget. Below it, a final note, different ink, shakier hand. If you found this, the bell has rung again, and the city still remembers. Footsteps creaked behind her. She turned. A man, older, with the same sharp jaw as the boy from the tower. Not quite him. Perhaps a brother, or a version from the future. "You're Eleanor," he said. She nodded. "I'm to give you this." He handed her a box. Inside, more charcoals, finer paper, and a single wrapped parcel. "For when you're ready to leave your own mark," he said. She tried to ask his name, but he was already gone. That night, Eleanor stayed awake long after the pigeons had settled on the sill. She unwrapped the parcel slowly. It was the original, her pigeon, wings outstretched, the word free beneath it, drawn not just with ink, but something brighter threaded through, gold maybe, or just light itself. She pinned it above her bed. And for the first time in months, she dreamed of rooftops, of fog, and of bells that could still be heard, even through silence. By week's end, the weather warmed, not much, but enough to lift the frost from the rooftops and coax chimney smoke to rise in thinner, lazier trails. Eleanor felt it too, the shift, like the city had taken a long breath. She returned to the foundry with the drawing of the cheese chase folded in her pocket. Mr. Cray eyed her with something almost like pride when she polished the bell's undercarriage without instruction. "Not many can manage that curve," he muttered. "Too easy to warp it." She just nodded. She had no words today, only thoughts of bells and birds and vanished boys. At midday, while cleaning the workbench drawers, she uncovered something odd, a length of etched copper, thin as a biscuit, rolled into a scroll. She uncoiled it carefully. Engraved in tight, looping script were notes, measurements, resonance studies, even music notations, and a name at the bottom, T. Pelham. Bell maker, Mr. Cray said behind her. Tobias. Worked this shop a generation ago. Said you could tune a bell like a violin. Never quite proved it, but he believed it. She studied the scroll. One of the notations looked familiar. It matched the little mark beside the bell drawn on her map. A tuning symbol. That evening, she returned to the little vine-carved shop. It was empty. Quiet. A soft layer of soot across the desk, as if untouched for days. But on the far wall, something new. A single drawing, the foundry bell, hanging in moonlight, its edge gleaming, a pigeon perched atop it, and below, 2 initials. TP beside it, another slip of paper, blank except for one question. Will you ring it? She didn't answer aloud, just stood there, the weight of silence pressing in, and nodded once. Tomorrow. She would ring it tomorrow. The morning arrived with a hush so profound, it felt like the city itself had paused. The usual clang of milk carts and shouting of newsboys was muffled beneath a layer of thick, ghostly fog. Eleanor stood at her window, one hand resting on the sill, eyes watching as the first hints of pale daylight spread across the rooftops. The bell tower called to her, not loudly, not insistently, but in that way old things call, quietly, persistently, as if reminding the living that they were still there, still waiting. She dressed with purpose, not in her patched skirts and soot-smeared apron, but in her father's old coat, slightly too long in the arms, and the boots her mother had hidden under the bed for winter emergencies. The cheese chase drawing was in her satchel, now folded inside a waxed paper envelope. The message was clear. Today, something would change. At the foundry, Mr. Cray raised an eyebrow. You're early. She nodded, brushing past with a soft, I need to be. She crossed the floor and ran a hand across the bell's base. The surface felt warmer than usual, as though it too had stirred early. She stepped around it to the narrow stair, climbed, and emerged once again onto the tower roof. This time, the city below seemed to lean in closer, like it knew what was coming. She took the cheese chase drawing and pinned it to the wooden support beam right beside the pigeon. Then slowly, deliberately, she reached for the pull rope. It had been knotted and tucked to the side, unused for decades, they said, but it moved smoothly in her grip. Her first tug was cautious. The rope creaked. A low rumble sounded within the metal. Then she pulled again, firmer. The bell rang. It wasn't loud, not sharp, but deep, resonant. The sound sank through the fog, wrapped itself around chimneys and rooftops, and found its way through alleys and narrow windows. It filled rooms where silence had settled like dust. In the baker's shop 2 streets over, a boy looked up from the kneading board. At the riverbank, an old man paused mid-cast. In a schoolroom, a teacher halted her reading. The sound touched them all. And in the tenement, Eleanor's mother looked up from her mending, eyes wide. Your father rang that bell once, she whispered to no one, before he left for the war. Back on the tower, Eleanor stood still, hand still resting on the rope. She didn't ring it again. It wasn't a bell that needed repetition. It was a bell meant for one clean moment. A bell that said, I was here. I saw. I remembered. She descended slowly. Mr. Cray waited at the bottom, arms folded. Didn't think it still worked. It does, she said. Just needed someone to listen. He studied her a long moment, then gave a nod that meant more than any words could. That afternoon, a small group gathered at the base of the foundry, not by design. They just drifted in, as if guided by instinct or memory. The baker, the teacher, the old man from the river, even the woman from the dock with the red shawl. Each had heard the sound. Each had remembered something they hadn't realized they'd forgotten. No one spoke much. They just stood together, watching the tower, and in her pocket, Eleanor felt the charcoal pencil the boy had left her. That night she drew, not just pigeons or cheese wheels, but the bell, the rooftop, the city as it had looked from above, quiet, breathing, remembering. She pinned the new drawing beside the others in the little vine-carved shop, and for the first time she signed her name, East Pelham. The bell had rung, the watcher had drawn, and the city had heard. By the week's turn, Eleanor noticed something peculiar. A trail of chalk symbols began appearing again, not just on her street but far beyond it. A triangle etched beside a lamplight. A circle carved low on a wall near the Apothecary. An arrow pointing left under the market's iron arch. They weren't random, and they weren't new. She recognized the marks from the foundry's old blueprints, the ones Mr. Cray let her sort through weeks ago. They were city markers, part of some forgotten surveyor's code used to record repairs and foundations, but someone was using them again or had never stopped. Her curiosity pulled her west, across unfamiliar cobbles and silent courtyards, tracing the symbols as one might follow breadcrumbs. She carried a sketchbook now, her own, no longer borrowed. In it, she recorded each sign, each turn, each whispered landmark. It felt like building a map of a city that didn't want to be seen. At the edge of Spitalfields, she found the next piece. A small brass disc embedded in the stone, nearly covered in soot. Around it, in etched script barely legible, read, "Third bell, North Quarter. Tuned for sorrow." It struck her as strange. Why sorrow? Why tune a bell to anything at all? She knelt and copied the inscription. That night, Eleanor visited the shop again. The vine-carved door opened easily now, creaking in familiarity. Inside, a new drawing had been tacked to the far wall. It wasn't hers. It was a map, faint lines of the city's eastern quarter, marked with the same surveyor's symbols, and on the edge, in hurried pencil, they were more than bells. They were signals. She stared at it long into the evening. Later at home, her mother said, "Your father once spoke of the old bellmen, before the war. Said they weren't just timekeepers, they were messengers. Said some bells could tell you if the queen had died or if the river was flooding just by the way they rang." Eleanor turned that over slowly. The bell hadn't just rung. It had meant something. In the days that followed, she tracked 2 more markers, one by the tanner's alley, another etched beneath a street sign so weather-worn it barely stood. Each bore fragments of code, notes in looping cursive, symbols no longer taught. She began redrawing the city, not as it was now, but as it once was, a place of hidden roots, rooftop watchers, and bells that spoke to those who listened. On the 4th day, the boy's brother returned. He stood in the doorway of the shop, this time not disappearing into fog. They were called the map makers, he told her, not just drawers or drafters. They chronicled what the city tried to forget. She offered him the map she'd copied. He took it gently. "Then you're one of them now." It was never official, no badge, no ceremony. But that evening, she found a thin parcel tucked behind the bell drawing. Inside was an old compass, still ticking, and a blank ledger. The first page bore only one line in faded ink. "To those who remember the sounds beneath the silence." She added her name below it, And then, in crisp charcoal strokes, she began the next map. Eleanor woke before the bell, the kind of waking that isn't startled, but rather summoned, as if something in the city had exhaled her name through the walls. It was still dark, yet not silent. Somewhere, a carriage wheel dragged, a distant cat yowled. But under it all, there was a hum, not a sound, but a sensation, like standing near a boiler or hearing a song you only remember in dreams. It threaded through her chest as she dressed quickly and slipped out, her sketchbook under one arm and the compass in her coat. This morning, the trail led south. The brass markers had grown more frequent, each etched near thresholds or half buried beneath stone. It felt like someone had laid them long ago, not to be found immediately, but eventually. She passed shops still shuttered and workers setting out bread trays behind windows. The gas lamps flickered against brick, and fog pulled low across the alleyways. By the time she reached the street known only as Bindery Row, her fingers were smudged with graphite. She'd copied 6 new markers, all pointing to the same place, a boarded-up bookbinder's shop nestled between a coal merchant and a clockmaker. She pressed her ear to the door. Nothing, but the hum was stronger here. The shop's front window bore faint letters, Pelham and Daughters, Fine Repairs. Her breath caught. Her father's name, her grandfather's too. She hadn't known there had been a shop. A rusted key hung behind a loose brick beside the door frame, as if someone had expected her. Inside, the air was warm, dry, and filled with the smell of paper, glue, and dust. Tall shelves lined the walls, all empty. The back wall, however, bore a curious detail, a bell pull, worn, frayed, but intact. She gave it a gentle tug. Somewhere beneath her feet, a chime answered. Not from a bell tower, from below. A trapdoor near the hearth bore the same triangle symbol she'd seen on the eastern map. Eleanor pried it open with a coal hook and climbed down a narrow ladder into a space she hadn't imagined could exist. A room beneath the shop, long, low, and filled with parchment rolls, instruments, ledgers. Each wall was covered in maps, not city plans, but layers, tunnels, roof roots, markings for bells. And there, mounted at the far end of the room, was a bell, not large, not ornate, but blackened from use and time. A single word was carved above it. Relay. The maps glowed in the lantern light. Dozens of hands had touched them, the corners worn, notes added in the margins, some in her father's scrawl. A message sat open on the table. To the next Pelham, we never rang for attention. We rang so no one would be forgotten. Eleanor stood still for a long while. Then she sat and opened the ledger left beside it. It was empty. She wrote one line, 17. The line continues. The watcher hears. The city breathes. Behind her, the bell shimmered faintly in the lamplight. She did not ring it. Not yet, but she would. Morning filtered dimly through the fog, just enough to silhouette the rooftops like black lace against a bleached sky. Eleanor stepped back onto the cobbled lane from her grandfather's hidden room with a different gait, not hurried, not hesitant, measured, like she belonged to something she hadn't known existed, but had always been waiting for. The street was quiet even for London. The usual pickpockets and fishmongers hadn't yet spilled into their roles, but on the lamp-post to her left she spotted a new mark, a slashed circle painted in dull charcoal, faded, as though it had been applied years ago. She checked the ledger. Yes, this one was known. Forgotten roots, compromised. She began walking in the direction it pointed, passing a bakery window and a boarded-up toy shop. Her compass swung gently on its chain, tugged slightly to the right. She turned down a tight lane where boots echoed too loudly and found a sealed manhole cover stamped with a strange emblem, 3 interlocking triangles. This wasn't on any of the maps. She knelt beside it and ran her hand across the rim. A ring of ridged teeth had been carved into the edge, almost like a key pattern, or a warning. When she looked up, she realized she wasn't alone. An older woman in a heavy shawl stood at the other end of the alley, not hiding, just waiting. Her face was weathered but kind, familiar. "You're Pelham's girl," the woman said. Eleanor nodded. "You found the room." Another nod. "Good. Then you'll know not all paths should be reopened." The woman turned and disappeared behind the corner, leaving only the sound of her boots and the faint clink of metal. Eleanor didn't pry open the manhole, not yet. Instead, she took out her pencil and carefully sketched the pattern, noting the emblem, direction, and the woman's words. When she returned to the bell shop that evening, a new drawing had appeared on the wall, one she hadn't put there. It showed the same interlocking triangles, but with an added note, warning route, last rung, 1892. She found the date in the oldest ledger. The handwriting was rushed, tunnel breached, lost to, covered, do not reopen. Some histories didn't need light. Some needed sealing. Eleanor gently tore out the sketch she had made of the manhole, folded it, and placed it in the back of the ledger under a scrap of leather. Then she drew a heavy line across the corresponding page. The bell in the basement chimed once that night, not loudly, just once. She didn't pull the rope. It rang itself. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a sense of pull, not unlike the way the compass tugged her feet through alleys and archways. Only this time it was internal. The maps downstairs showed dozens of routes she had yet to trace, but something in her bones told her where to go next. Clerkenwell. She remembered it from one of her father's stories, barely a story, more of a fragment he'd mumbled when half asleep in his chair. The bell in Clerkenwell never tolled again, not after the silence set in. It had sounded like nonsense at the time. Now it felt like a breadcrumb. She followed the old postal road and turned off where the stones narrowed, crossing a courtyard littered with drying laundry and one-eyed cats. Just past an abandoned tea warehouse, she found a building that didn't seem to know it was still standing. Its bricks sagged slightly, like breath exhaled and never taken back in. There was no door, only a velvet curtain hanging limp in the doorway, and beyond it, stillness. She stepped inside. Dust swirled gently in the filtered light, and the air smelled like old books and candle wax. The room was large, empty of people, but not empty of presence. Against the far wall stood a bell, not one of the messenger bells. This was different. No rope, no clapper. Just a carved inscription that circled its bronze like a whisper. "Let this one never ring again." Eleanor stepped closer. The floorboards beneath the bell were worn, but solid. No trapdoor here, only silence. She reached out, not to ring it, but to feel the metal. Cold, smooth, and then warmth. A hum, familiar, echoing the vibration she'd felt beneath the bookbinder's floor. But this one felt heavier, burdened. She opened her ledger and found a loose page tucked inside. Clerkenwell Bell, dormant, not sealed, carries messages of mourning. Used only once during the black line. Do not awaken. The black line? She'd seen the phrase etched once, faintly, at the base of a bell diagram. Never explained. She drew the bell carefully into her ledger, including the inscription and surrounding room. Then she closed the book and backed away, never turning her back to the bell. Outside, the air felt brighter. The pull had lessened, but something had shifted. That evening, when she returned to the shop, the lamp was already lit, and in the center of the table, a new map had been unfurled, one she didn't remember placing. It showed a quarter of the city unlabeled, edged in red, and across its center, the black line. By candlelight, the red-inked map glowed like a wound on the desk, uncertain, bordered, and ominously unlabeled. Eleanor traced its edges with a cautious finger, her brow furrowed. The black line carved through neighborhoods like Clerkenwell, Holborn, and down toward the docks, but offered no explanations, no notations. Just silence, inked in defiance of clarity. She'd never seen this district mapped so starkly. The term had floated like folklore in the older pages of the ledgers. The black line must not be crossed. 3 bells fell when the line was breached. The black line carried messages only the dying could hear, but no context, no origin, no end. Eleanor studied the curve of it, and then did what her instincts had always told her. Follow it. Not with boots just yet, but with knowledge. She returned to the shelf where her grandfather had kept city records, dry entries, train schedules, plague notices. But among them a slim folder stood out, a vellum cover, brittle but intact. Inside, a sheaf of papers dated to 1858, marked only Goswell transcript. She flipped through the pages. Testimonies, notes on underground damage, witness accounts. I heard the bell, but no one pulled it. It rang once, and the boy never came back. The tunnel buckled like paper, and then the air changed. Wet, like breath that wasn't yours. Don't follow it past the 3rd rung, not even with your lantern lit. She exhaled slowly, the candle flickering. This wasn't just fear or superstition. This was documented, whispered between lines by those who had seen too much and lived long enough to warn the rest. Early the next morning, Eleanor packed carefully. A wrapped bit of bread, graphite gloves, her father's watch, and the smallest of the lanterns. The compass she wore on a chain over her collarbone now felt heavier. She traced the black line with her feet this time, starting near the old Clerkenwell bell and drifting southeast. At first the city was unchanged, busy, indifferent, but then as she crossed into the unlabeled stretch, something shifted. It wasn't silence exactly, but a strange fullness, like the city was holding its breath. Few people walked here, even fewer made eye contact. The alleys widened and narrowed in ways that defied logic, and more than once she thought she heard footsteps behind her, only to find nothing but soot and fog. At the edge of a stone yard long since overgrown, she spotted a low doorway set into the wall. The paint had peeled away, revealing the faint glimmer of the Pelham triangle. Beneath it, someone had scrawled in chalk, "Line Station." Eleanor opened the door and descended. The corridor sloped sharply, and water dripped from above. Unlike the bell chambers, this passage wasn't built to last. It felt temporary, frantic, yet it remained. At the end of the tunnel was a small circular room with 3 alcoves. In the center, a pedestal with a cracked bell base. The bell itself was missing. Each alcove bore a word: breached, sealed, forgotten. She approached the one labeled sealed. Inside, a wall of stone and brick, reinforced with iron bands, blocked what had once been a passage, scribbled on its surface. Here the boy turned back. Here the breath ended. Do not ring. Eleanor did not touch the wall. Instead, she sat on the stone floor and copied the room's layout into her ledger. She marked the cracked pedestal, the alcoves, the warning. Then she made one quiet note beneath the sketch. Some things resist even memory, but still they breathe. As she climbed back up toward the surface, the lantern dimmed. Outside, the fog had grown thick. She emerged into an alley that no longer looked like the one she'd entered. The stones beneath her boots were older. The air smelled of coal smoke and rosemary. She turned in time to see the faintest figure slip through the other end of the alley. A tall man in an old coat, walking with a limp. She followed, heart steady. The compass ticked once, and then all was quiet again. Eleanor walked the mist-hung lanes the next morning with the feeling that someone had turned a page she hadn't meant to flip. The lines between past and present were smudged now, chalked over by the black line and blurred by the city's odd memory. Even the bells seemed quieter that day, as if listening to her thoughts. She turned onto Buckle Street, a lesser-known road just off Whitechapel. Her grandfather's notes had once mentioned a woman there, M.E., keeper of embers and ash. At the far end of the road stood a soot-marked house with iron shutters and faded lavender trailing down its brickwork. The door was ajar, though no one lingered nearby. When Eleanor stepped inside, a wave of warmth met her. Not just heat, but the weight of stories and smoke and generations of breath. The woman sat by the hearth. Her back was straight despite her years, and she wore black gloves that shimmered faintly with cinders. "You're not the first to come looking," the woman said without turning. Eleanor stepped forward, "but perhaps the first with questions." The woman smiled. "Oh, they all have questions. Just not the kind they're ready to answer." Above the hearth hung a bell, not brass, but carved from a single piece of obsidian. Cold, soundless, it gleamed darkly. "You're M.E.?" Eleanor asked. "Mina Ellsworth," the woman replied. "But names get tired. I tend the ledgers now, the ones that keep track of the fires." Eleanor glanced around. The walls were stacked with bound books, some scorched, some wax-sealed, others held together with wire. She stepped closer to one. "That one's from the dockside blaze of 67, Mina said. 15 dead, 42 displaced. One survivor kept hearing bells for the rest of his life, though none ever rang." "Why keep records?" Eleanor asked. "Because fire forgets," Mina replied, "and London doesn't forgive." Mina rose and moved toward a small iron chest. She opened it, revealing a bundle of narrow ledgers tied with crimson ribbon. She handed one to Eleanor. It was labeled "The Cinder List, 1834. Inside, pages scorched at the edges, but words intact. Entry 14. A young man heard his mother's voice in the fire. She had been dead a decade. Entry 21. The flame turned blue when the bellmaker died. Entry 37. Smoke rose in rings 4 times, then silence. The next morning, the Thames turned black at the banks. "These are not just accidents," Eleanor whispered. "They're intersections," Mina said, "where something unseen enters and touches what's real. London has layers, and not all burn clean." Eleanor lingered at a sketch on the final page. A small stone tower, with a bell in its crown and fire drawn around its base. "Where is this?" Mina's gaze sharpened. "That's the hollow steeple, burned in the winter of 1788. The bell rang for 3 days straight, though no one was left to pull the rope." "Did it survive?" Mina nodded. "The bell did. They sealed it away. It said the sound still leaks through, but only when something is about to change. Eleanor felt her pulse tick. Where is it now? You'll need to follow the embers, Mina replied. But be careful. Bells that burn don't always return. Before Eleanor left, Mina handed her a brass key and a slip of paper. It held a single sentence. Strike the flint where 4 shadows meet. The fog thickened again as Eleanor stepped back outside. But something was different. The air tasted of char, and somewhere, deep beneath the cobbles, a sound like a bell exhaling flickered across the silence. Eleanor walked back toward the center of the city with the brass key clutched tightly in her coat pocket. The folded slip of paper rested in her glove, the ink beginning to smudge from the warmth of her fingers. Strike the flint where 4 shadows meet. She read it again and again. Each time the words felt older, heavier, like they'd been written long before they ever reached her hand. It had rained during the night. The cobblestones gleamed in the pale morning, as if the streets had been freshly polished in preparation for something. She turned through alleyways and across old bridges toward a part of London that maps often forgot. Here the buildings leaned closer, and their shadows met at crooked corners. At the junction of Gutter Lane and Stonepipe Passage, Eleanor paused. The air felt cooler, denser. She waited, watching the shadows stretch and shift. At precisely midday, the sun cleared the soot from the skyline, and 4 shadows pooled across the cobbles to touch at a single point. Eleanor dropped to her knees and struck her pocket flint against the stone. Once, twice, a third time, and then a small spark landed on a round iron ring buried in the pavement. It clicked. The ring lifted with effort, revealing a stone stairwell spiraling downward into the gloom. The air below was dry and thick. Old candle smoke clung to the walls. She held the key forward as she walked, unsure if it unlocked anything, or merely proved she had the right to descend. The corridor widened. Columns emerged, not of marble, but of iron, bolted and soldered like the spine of a ship. And there, in the center of a round room, stood a sealed wooden door, reinforced with brass and wrapped in soot-darkened chains. Eleanor inserted the key. The lock resisted, then surrendered. The door creaked open into a chamber lined with relics. Melted clock faces, soot-dusted oil paintings, a child's shoe, burned black, and in the very center, a bell. It was small, no larger than a breadbasket, but its surface shimmered like hot glass. Carved symbols ringed its base, suns, towers, eyes closed in sleep, the hollow steeple bell. Her breath slowed. The silence was complete. Too complete. Then a tone, not loud, not sharp, just a hum that trembled up from the floor into her shoes, into her spine. The bell was not rung. It was remembering. Eleanor stepped closer. She touched its rim. A breath, not hers. A scent of lavender, smoke, rain. And then, visions. The bakery on fire. The pigeons rising, the factory, the dock, the boy in the soot, the bookbinder's cellar, the ledger, the tower, all the places she had touched, or that had touched her. And beneath it all, the city, London, ancient and watching, not cruel, not kind, just present, always. A small voice echoed, childlike. You found it. Eleanor turned. No one was there. The bell rang again, within her, not in the air. She felt warmth, a memory. Her grandfather's workshop, the way he used to hold the tools like prayers. She sat beside the bell, took out the slip of paper, turned it over. On the back, now legible in the heat, another line. Where it ends, begin again. Eleanor smiled. It wasn't a mystery anymore. It was an invitation. And above on the streets the bells began to ring. The bells that rang above weren't uniform, not the deep bellow of St. Paul's or the ceremonial chimes of Westminster, but smaller, scattered peals from forgotten belfries and old parish towers. Each seemed to strike a different hour. No rhythm, no agreement. Yet Eleanor heard meaning in the mess of sound, like a sentence being spelled out across rooftops. She emerged from the stairwell into late afternoon, blinking against the light. The streets were empty, as though London had paused to hear its own breath. She knew her steps wouldn't take her back to the same city she had left. The bell had seen to that. As she turned west, Eleanor felt a tug, not physical, not even emotional, but something in the soles of her feet guiding her forward, toward parchment, toward ink, toward memory. At the edge of Clerkenwell, tucked between a closed apothecary and a lamplighter's storeroom, stood a shop with no name. The windows were frosted with age, and inside maps hung like sleeping birds from the ceiling. Each corner of the room was pinned with geography, folded hills, curling rivers, and streets that no longer existed. A man leaned over a long table, his quill paused midair. "You've seen the bell," he said without turning. Eleanor stepped inside. "Is it that obvious?" The man nodded. "Most who visit me smell faintly of ink. You smell of fire." His name was Thorn. No title, no surname, just Thorn. He claimed to be a cartographer, though his maps recorded more than terrain. He drew impressions, shadows left by things that could not be seen from towers or airships. "You're looking for what comes next," he said, unrolling a vellum sheet. "What do you mean? The bell doesn't end anything. It starts the recharting." Eleanor studied the map. London was there, but differently. The Thames twisted slightly too far north. Churches rose where no churches stood. One street was marked with a sigil instead of a name. "What is this?" "London," Thorne said, but drawn by echo, not by sight. He pointed to a small mark near Southwark. "That is where memory pools. The city forgets slowly, but it never forgets fully. Go there. Bring this." He handed her a vial of dark ink. "It's made from soot, ash, and a drop of bell metal. You'll know when to use it." The walk to Southwark was quieter than expected. No carriages passed, even the birds seemed elsewhere. Eleanor moved past the stalls and shut windows of the borough market and down an alley paved with round stones worn soft by footfall. At its end was a wall. Nothing marked it. No doorway, no graffiti. Just a slab of age-smoothed stone, warmed faintly by a sun that had long vanished behind chimney stacks. She dipped her finger into the vial and traced the sigil Thorne had shown her. For a breath, nothing. Then the stone folded. Not like a door, more like a curtain pulled aside. And she walked through. Inside was a garden, not of flowers or trees, but of whispers. Every plant shimmered faintly with memory. A fern exhaled a child's laughter. A patch of moss glowed faintly and whispered a lullaby. At its center sat a bench, and on the bench a woman Eleanor had never seen, but instantly knew. Her grandmother, young, radiant, wearing the same necklace Eleanor kept tucked in her drawer. "Sit," the woman said, patting the bench. Eleanor did. She didn't ask how. She didn't need to. "I saw it too," the woman said. "The bell, the flame, the key." "Did it change you?" Eleanor asked. The woman smiled gently. "It reminded me who we were, who we could be again." They sat in silence, not the empty kind, but the full kind, the kind that hums. After a long moment, the woman handed her a folded map. Eleanor opened it. The ink shimmered blue. On the top was written, "To be used when lost, and only then." She looked up, but the bench was empty. Only the map remained. And outside, London began to shift again. The streets had changed again. Eleanor stepped out of the garden and onto cobblestones that had not been there before. The buildings leaned differently, as if London had exhaled and settled into a new shape. A chimney that once stood crooked now straightened toward the sky. A sign that used to read Brewster and Sons now bore no name at all. She clutched the map given to her by the woman on the bench, her grandmother and not her grandmother. It still shimmered faintly with that impossible blue ink, humming softly beneath her fingers. The path it marked now twisted through a row of townhouses she didn't recognize, but she walked it. Every step seemed to stitch the world into place. At the end of the path was a narrow door, painted in a fading green. It stood barely higher than Eleanor's shoulder. A brass plaque beside it read, "The Weaver." She didn't knock. She simply opened the door and stepped into warmth. Inside, spools of thread hung from the ceiling like chandeliers. Fabric draped every wall, every corner, every chair. Some were ordinary, wool, silk, linen, but others pulsed. One bolt shimmered like starlight. Another flickered with shadows of cities no longer standing. At the center sat a woman hunched over a loom. Her hands moved swiftly but silently, guiding threads through what looked like empty space. "I was wondering when you'd come," the weaver said, not looking up. "You knew I would?" "I know when someone touches the ink of memory, it leaves a mark." Eleanor stepped closer. "What are you weaving?" The weaver paused, then held up the edge of her tapestry. It was London, but layered, multiple versions at once. The smoky haze of the Blitz overlaid with horse-drawn carts, overlaying still with empty gaslight streets. A palimpsest of centuries. "I'm stitching the timelines," the weaver said. "Memory doesn't walk in a straight line. It curls. It overlaps. Someone must keep the threads from knotting." "And what do I do?" The weaver tilted her head. "You remember, and remembering is dangerous." She pointed to a golden thread. It glowed brighter than the others. "This is yours. It's fraying." "Why?" "Because you're nearly at the end." Eleanor stepped back. Her heart beat softly in her ears. "End of what?" "Your path in this version of the city." The weaver rose. She was older than Eleanor first thought, perhaps older than time itself. Her eyes were deep and distant, like windows into every London that had ever existed. She placed something into Eleanor's palm, a needle of silver, small and cool to the touch. "When the threads begin to snap, this will show you which one to tie." Eleanor looked down at the map again. The ink shimmered, then dimmed slightly, pointing her back toward the river. "The next place is already waiting," the weaver said, "but be careful. Some memories don't want to be found." Eleanor stepped through the curtain of cloth that hung in the doorway, needle in one hand, map in the other. As she walked, the needle pulsed faintly, once for each step that took her closer to the river's edge. The Thames was lower than before, its banks exposed and lined with broken pottery and coal soot. But down the slope, something new had appeared. Pillars, partially buried, made of stone and iron. The arches formed a half circle, like a broken necklace fallen into the mud. Eleanor stood at the edge, uncertain. The needle twitched toward the largest arch. She stepped beneath it, and the world turned again. The air shifted. Eleanor had walked through arches before, cathedrals, gardens, doorways to bakeries and bookshops. But this one opened into something altogether different, a tunnel lined with metal and soot, humming faintly beneath her feet. The ground no longer felt like stone, but steel. The scent of coal and oil curled in her nose. Lamps lit themselves as she passed, casting an amber glow across the ribs of the iron corridor. It stretched ahead, impossibly long. She didn't know where she was, and yet she did. This was the path London had hidden, deep beneath its cobbles and chimneys, a secret artery, built not of intention, but of consequence, the places industry forgot, the spaces where memory piled like dust. She walked. Above her vague sounds echoed, a train perhaps, distant and heavy. Then the clang of boots, the shuffle of cloth, the murmur of voices. But when she stopped, the air fell silent. Midway through the tunnel, Eleanor found a door. It was bolted in brass, reinforced by rivets, and bore a small plaque that read, Central Line Test Shaft Number 3, established 1864. She pushed it open. Beyond was a chamber round and wide, lined with ledgers and valves and strange switches, each humming as if still remembering the touch of human hands. A single chair faced a console filled with dials. A man sat there. His beard was thick with coal dust, his coat patched at the elbows. He didn't turn, but his voice filled the room. "I thought you might arrive during the shift. Most do." "What is this place?" Eleanor asked. "One of the first echoes," he said, "where London folded itself in half and forgot how it began." He finally turned, and Eleanor saw his eyes, sharp but kind, burnt with years. Beneath his chair lay a stack of journals, each marked with the name of a street she had walked. "You're a recorder," she said. "I used to be," he replied. "Now I'm just the one who keeps the gears from freezing. Memory rusts quickly, if not oiled." He handed her one of the journals. "Open it." Inside were sketches, pages of Eleanor, standing in the mapmaker's room, holding the silver needle, kneeling before the weaver. But there was more. Drawings of her in places she hadn't yet seen. The arches. A staircase carved in iron. A figure in red. "You're drawing the future." "I'm only recording what's inevitable. You've come far, but the final loop is always the tightest." Eleanor looked down. The silver needle glowed warm against her palm. "Where to next?" The man stood and gestured to a lever embedded in the wall. Above it, a sign that read to South Wharf. "You'll take the shaft. It's steep. You may want to hold your breath." Eleanor pulled the lever. The ground beneath her shuddered. Panels retracted. A platform descended slowly into darkness. She stepped on. As she lowered, light thinned. The tunnel walls turned from iron to earth to stone until she emerged into a wide cavern lined with brick and moss. Water trickled. The scent of salt filled the air. South Wharf was not above ground. It was a hidden quarter beneath the city, carved long ago and abandoned before any mapmaker could ink it. Merchants once hid goods here. Spies once passed messages through coded lantern flashes. The city's past clung here like cobwebs. As Eleanor stepped off the lift, she saw them, dozens of others like her. Not identical, not mirrors, but echoes. Women, men, children, all walking threads of their own storylines, brushing past one another, but never touching. The silver needle vibrated. She followed it. It led her through narrow alleys, past rusted doors, to a final chamber where a staircase rose upward in tight spirals. Each step flickered with candlelight. At the top, a window, small, circular, and streaked with soot. Through it, Eleanor saw London. Not one version, all of them. Horse-drawn cabs in the same lanes as electric trams, top hats beneath neon, chimneys stacked beside cranes. The city wasn't linear, it never had been, it was woven. And Eleanor now knew the way the threads aligned. She stepped back from the window. The silver needle dimmed. Another door appeared. This one wasn't marked, but as she stepped toward it, the tunnel behind her sighed. She was ready. She stepped through the final door and found herself in stillness. The air was quiet, the light soft, neither day nor night, but a pale silver wash that cast no shadow. The walls shimmered like woven fabric, threads of memory and moment drifting gently across them. Eleanor walked slowly. Her shoes made no sound. Every step felt familiar, like returning to a place half remembered. The needle, now dim in her hand, guided her toward the center of the room. There sat a loom, massive, ancient, wrought from wood and glass and quiet breath. It moved, not by hands, but by history. Threads passed through it, moments from lives she'd touched, glimpses of shopkeepers, of whispering gaslights, of notes slipped beneath teacups. The city's heartbeat, recorded not in stone or steam, but in memory. A chair awaited her. She sat. The loom accepted her presence and adjusted. Her silver needle melted gently into the mechanism, becoming part of its rhythm. Then without instruction her hands began to move. She wove, not with fabric, but with what had been. A thread of laughter, a flicker of candlelight from the weaver's hall, the warmth of hands clasped on the bridge. She wove until her breath slowed, until the loom moved with ease, until her heart matched the city's pulse. The needle had not been a tool. It had been a key. To understanding, to remembering, to continuing, and when she was done, the loom paused. Before her, woven into the tapestry, shimmered a path, not forward, not backward, but inward. Eleanor stood, a final breath, a soft smile. She stepped into the weave. The room folded gently behind her. Above, the city exhaled. And far above that, a single gaslight flickered, then steadied. Good night, London.